Hello, my name is David Evans, and in this video I'm going to take you through some of the features from the DV plugin tool and also show you some research on how to use scaling in with your positions. So what we have in front of us here is a spreadsheet generated by the DV plugin. It uses the, in this case we're examining the DVB indicator, and you can see we have it applied to the S&P 500 tracking ETF, the SPY, and the tool automatically generates the DVB levels for you, tells you the current signal, 1 for long, -1 for short. But this is actually a modified version which we may make available to all subscribers, and that actually shows you your exposure on any position, which allows you to play around with scaling in and out of positions. What that means is if you wanted to, instead of taking one position on a trade, that you divide your position up into a number of units, and you then may only there are different ways of entering this with different types of scaling you can do, but in the simplest form, in this example I'm going to go show you, you scale in on the next day if the position is still if the signal is still in the same position as the previous day. For example, here we have a signal to go short. I should reiterate this data goes up it goes from around 2001 up to 2011, the 11th of July. So if you can see here that the signal right here on the 28th of June was to go short. Now if you're using one position, you would have entered your full position here, and you would not have exited until you got your exit position here, which was to go long. By dividing your position into a number of units, you divide your total stake or your total liability. Instead of all being up front, that you may enter in halves. So you may have entered half your position first here, then half your position here. Or you may have divided it into four, so in which case you'd enter 1/4 here, 1/4 here, 1/4 here, 1/4 here, and then you'd be fully exposed until you get the exit signal. Now the reasons for doing this, the initial advantage of course would be that you're not stepping down, you're not fully exposed initially into a position. So for example, if you enter a trade and the market, if you're going short as this signal was here, and the market continued to go higher quite aggressively, then you're not fully exposed in that first leg. So what you find might happen is that instead of being fully exposed on the first position, you spread the risk, or you average down your cost of entry across 4 different positions. And now obviously the disadvantage of this is that what you might find is that your first position is where you get your biggest returns. So your first position, you're only so let's just say you decide to divide your units into 4, and if your first leg is consistently generating the profit or turning around a trade, so let's just say for example here we've got a short signal, it's -1, and if you divided your trade into 4 units, you would have entered a quarter of your unit here, and that quarter of your unit would have made a profit, but it would only be the quarter of the profit you would have made on a full unit because the trade reversed the next day. So it swings and roundabouts. So in certain conditions, the entry into units will help divide your risk across a number of units by scaling, but on the other hand, it can reduce your returns because if your profits come from your initial first few trades, then those profits will be divided by the number of units you enter. So what we want, there are 2 key performance measures we're going to look at here. And the first is the CAGR, which is the compound annual growth rate. So we can see here the 250-day compound annual growth rate and the 2,517-day CAGR. So both of these are very good here, we can see. But down here we have the max drawdown. The max drawdown is the biggest peak to trough loss you will have experienced on your account. So what this is effectively saying here is that your annual compound growth rate is around 32%, but your max drawdown is 26%. Now there's a nice neat metric which combines these two, which is the MAR, which simply helps you, which divides the compound annual growth rate by the max drawdown. So here we have 1.22, and that's very respectable indeed. Very good, very good. Now what we want, as I'm talking about with these examples, is we want to see if scaling in can help us keep returns very good and respectable and reduce drawdown risk. Now what we don't want is for it to reduce returns and not reduce drawdown risk significantly. For example, by dividing your position into 4 or even 10 if you wanted to, then you might find that your returns drop significantly, but your drawdown risk may not reduce by the same magnitude. So let's now have a look at what we can do with a strategy which trades the DVB long and short. So first of all, let's have a look at the entry criteria. So this is a very basic way of trading it. So what we're saying here is we're entering the DVB when we're entering long when the DVB drops below 0.5, and we're going short when it goes above 0.5. So that's a fairly basic way of trading the DVB. And so we have a 32% CAGR, a 26% max drawdown, and MAR of 1.22. So fairly good, and our win trades are 63%. Now let's have a look at what happens if we scale it. Let's say, let's just go 2. So instead of 1 unit, we do it in 2 units. So we can see now in this column, which I hope you can see if this zooms in, the trade enters here, the signal is short, but we only enter half first, and then we're fully exposed for the rest of the trade. So this, unfortunately, this percentage gain here is halved as to what it would have been normally. So what happens? Well, the CAGR reduces to 26%, but the max drawdown decreases to 20%, and the MAR increases from 1.22 to 1.3. So now we can see that although the annual returns have been reduced, we're actually getting a greater reduction in our drawdowns. So by splitting our positions in 2, we're actually improving things on a risk-adjusted basis, which is very good. Now, unfortunately, it's not as simple as doing this indefinitely. And just to do an extreme example, if you want to divide your position into 10, your compound annual growth rate only hits 8%, and the max drawdown is 8%. Now, the MAR is still actually very respectable at over 1. Your win trades is over 71%. You can see what the kind of mechanics of what's happening here, and that your position will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as it goes through to there. But so you also have the problem, the kind of practical problem of managing or remembering or entering 10 different slots like that. So we can see that it isn't an exponential benefit of actually dividing your units into a greater number. So there is a cutoff where this becomes more worthwhile. So 2 seems very good, and if we just look at 3, you can see it's not as good as 1. It's not as good as 2. But there may be psychological benefits beyond just pure numbers in terms of dividing up your units, and the reason being is that if you many times that the market would can do as it has done here and carry on in the same direction, in which case you may be quite rightfully cautious in taking a full position straight away. So, and then, but often these are when the best returns come. Is when you're most fearful, you don't want to trade. Generally, they're the times that you should be trading. Obviously, not always, but it's those times when the crowd are doing one thing and screaming, oh, everything's fine, it's a bull market. That often the best returns come by going the other way, or vice versa. So. And that often takes a psychological courage to do that. And one way to circumvent that is to divide your position into units. So although it may reduce your risk-adjusted returns slightly, from a psychological perspective, it may actually improve your take-home returns, because you're actually acting on these trade signals which you may have missed due to caution previously. So they're the advantages and disadvantages of scaling in, scaling out. Now let's have a look at some of the advantages of looking at maybe more extreme positions. So let's just say you enter, I'll just set this up. Okay. What this has done now is, instead of your baseline way of trading the DVB, we're looking at extreme measures, and this is perhaps a good example of where you really might want to employ scaling, because for the DVB to hit 0.2 or 0.8, you're looking at quite a bigger swing within the markets, and especially in those situations you might be more fearful than usual. So scaling in might help you to psychologically pull the trigger. So you can have the best trading system or the best trading strategy in the world, but if you're too afraid to pull the trigger on that trade, then it's no good. And this is where scaling in can really help again. So here's the signals. We go long on a DVB level below 0.2. We exit at 0.8. And again, for shorts, we enter at 0.8 and we exit at 0.5. Now I've skewed this just because the inherent upwards bias in the market. So generally it might be better to exit your short trades a bit quicker. So we can see here that the CAGR is 32%, which is actually very good. It actually improves on the CAGR of the baseline 0.5 entries, and the drawdown risk is also reduced to 19%. And the MAR is very good at 1.63. Now let's just see what happens if we divide it into number of units. So we can see it does drop. It does drop here with the CAGR reduces, and part of the problem is that the max drawdown doesn't decrease hugely. But we've still got a MAR of 1.48, which is better than the baseline scenario. But so again, you may not want to look at this just from pure numbers point of view, but from a psychological perspective, because you're dealing with more extreme moves. In reality, you might find it more difficult to actually pull the trigger on these trades, and by dividing the trade into a number of units, yes, your take-home performance is reduced, but it's still a very respectable, and it doesn't reduce it to such an extent that it makes it not worth bothering with. So, but even dividing it into 4 units, for example, this is still better than the baseline 0.5 baseline DVB trading method. So the CAGR is 20% and the drawdown reduced to around 16%. So that's different ways you could perhaps trade the DVB using scaling in. So just to recap, in this video, what I've covered is the DVB plugin, the DV plugin tool, and different ways how you can get results by scaling in, which keeps your returns respectable, decreasing your drawdown risk at the same time, but mainly to show you how the benefit is not just in the risk-adjusted returns, but in the psychology of being able to pull the trigger in volatile trading conditions.